Ireland has, and not unlike other countries, by the way, Italy is one that springs to mind that had these enormous institutions as well where people were detained in relation to their mental health. Mm-hmm. And Ireland was another country. England did have the same structure, but not the same numbers. And I think that gives you cause to ponder why that would be so. But we have made enormous progress in relation to the institutions and closing them down. I mean, we had institutions in this country that held up to 1,000 people. That's bigger than some small towns. And yet there were people that were there in some instances for short periods of time, which could be about 12 months. For in other instances, up to 50 to 60 years, depending on how long they lived. It was a lifelong incarceration. So we have done that. Now, the Mental Health Act, the original Mental Health Act that we're talking about now, 2001, was a very progressive Mental Health Act. But then in 2006, the launching of a Vision for Change, which is the template and the plan as to how we deliver mental health services in this country and how people engage as well. It's not one-sided, it's actually multifaceted. And, you know, that has moved things along so dramatically. And that a review of the 2001 Act, even though it is only, 12 years old, a review of that seemed obvious. And there are things in it that are getting particular attention now. The group has been meeting for a few months, and I'm not going to preempt what they're going to say, but I would have to say that there are particular issues that I've asked them to look at, such as the involvement of families. And I'm not certain how you can legitimately allow that to happen, other than by way of consultant psychiatrists and indeed the community mental health teams that we're now putting in place. You're having that interaction with families, which I believe happens on a regular basis. For the first time ever, I suppose as long as I've been in politics, we managed to get a development money in relation to mental health. And I believe that's really the place we need to go. In total, over 2 years, we've gotten 70 million. Now that's 70 million normally, in the way the service was set up before. The RDOs, the 4 RDOs in the country would have that split into 4 and send it down to us, and we'll deliver the service here. We didn't do that this time. I mean, basically what we did was we said, send us in a business plan. Tell us where the gaps are in your service. Do you need psychologists? Is it psychiatrists? Is it in relation to children? Is it old age psychiatry? Is it nurses? Is it, where are the gaps in your service? And that's what they've done. And then we filled those gaps. So, we're making enormous progress in a very short period of time. But I would have to say that the reason I believe that it's, the change is so obvious is because the service up to this point wasn't great anyway. So it's easier to see progress in an area that you didn't have great progress in before. So, the institutions are closing. We are moving into the community, and it's not just either about institutions and walls, it's about attitude. And you can move someone from the big institution, as I said, to the small institution, and that small institution may very well be a 3-bedroom house in a community. That's attitudinal. And we have put a lot of resources into ensuring that the attitude has changed as well. And training up teams. Teams don't naturally gel together. Some do, personalities come together and they work very well. But it's not something that happens automatically. So we've put a lot of resources into training up teams in how to work as teams and how to support one another. And of course, central to all of this is how the person receiving the service is supported. I think there are very clear guidelines around and clear definitions within the medical sphere itself as to whether someone has a particular condition. I'm always reluctant to be that prescriptive when it comes to someone making a clinical diagnosis. I think we need to be careful about that. And clearly the colleges that train people in the various professions have their own definitions and their own markers in relation to particular conditions. So we do need to be very careful about how we do that. We've expanded the definition rather than narrowing it, and we've expanded the definition, and because of the circumstances that people find themselves in. Most people's, not on the acute side, but most people's mental health difficulties are a result of life events. So it's not just about treating that particular condition. It's equally about expanding and finding out exactly what are the triggers and what causes it. But they're all very clinical decisions, and I think we should be careful about straying into that area. All we can do in legislation is ensure patient safety, and that the treating clinician has, if you like, the legal safeguards to treat. It can take away someone's liberty, and it can actually suspend your constitutional right without having committed a crime to your liberty, and that's why we have to be extremely careful about it. There are particular pieces in the review of the Mental Health Act that I asked that particular attention would be paid to. Like, for instance, if you go in as a voluntary patient, and then when you decide that you're okay and you want to go home, then all of a sudden you're an involuntary patient. Where does that occur? How does it occur? What's the process around it? And they're things that we have to put a very clear process in place around, so as that people feel comfortable, because what that does is actually make people reluctant to go to an acute unit looking for help, and we have to be very careful about that. And it is the only piece of legislation where you can suspend someone's constitutional right to liberty in the event that they haven't committed a crime. So it is all about the person. I think sometimes legislation is about protecting professionals, and my aim would always be that it is clearly about the central issue of protecting the individual, either in the service, how they approach the service, and how they're treated in an outreach basis.